Welcome to tonight's live stream. I'm going to get started in a minute. Just want to let everybody know the stream is going on right now. Going on Nightingale Wednesday Nightmare. Glad to see you here. And tonight's live stream is where I'm going to discuss a book I was looking forward to. And this was a book that when I heard about it over a year ago, I was anticipating picking up. And this book was called Male versus Man, written by Dondre Whitfield, who is the actor who played on The Cosby Show, All My Children, and sitcoms like Between Brothers and numerous other shows that he's played in. And I really liked a lot of Dondre T. Whitfield's work as an actor. And I was looking, and I know that he puts out really quality performances. And he did. I remember watching him in Girlfriends and other shows like that. So I was really looking forward to picking up this book. And since I didn't want to wait for a paperback to get released to me, I put in my pre-order on Amazon's Kindle, and I picked up your Dondre T. Whitfield's Male versus Man. So I'm gonna bring it up on the phone so everybody can, take that look at it. So I picked up Dondre T. Whitfield's Male versus Man, and after reading it on my phone for the last 3 days, I have to say it's a very solid book. It's very well written. Dondre T. Whitfield has done a very good job of showing us the definitions of a male and the definition of a man in his first nonfiction book. And as I was reading this book, I could really relate to a lot of the topics that Dondre was talking about in presenting his thesis of male versus man. And these are things that I have presented in many of my videos over the last 6 or 7 years. And over the 10 years, I have done my research on the whole man crisis and the nice guy paradigm. Dondre T. Whitfield has really substantiated a lot of the information I presented in his book, Male versus Man. So he presented a lot of the talking points I talked about in many of my blogs and many of my own men's issues books, like The Man Crisis and your Dondre T. Whitfield. What I liked about this book is, again, he starts out really breaking down that definition of a male and a definition of a man. And what I also like about the book is the fact that he, like me, uses the Bible as his foundation for presenting his talking points regarding the male versus the man. So that was another thing I like seeing in his book. And I like seeing the fact that we have Dondre T. Whitfield walking with God, just like I walk with God. And when I was reading the book, I like seeing that, he came from a lot of experiences that I came from growing up in the South Bronx, growing up poor, and growing up in an environment where you really didn't get that many male life skills because what happened was there weren't that many fathers out there to teach boys the skills that they would need to become men. But what I liked about the book the most is that it showed how Dondre overcame a lot of those obstacles and took the path towards learning manhood. And one of the things I liked about the book as well was where how he shows how you can work towards becoming a man, even though you are running into a lot of obstacles like not having a father in your life. You can still learn how to grow into manhood. And Dondre talks about matriculating into manhood, which is where you, like going to college, you start learning what you need to know. And as you learn what you need to know, what happens is you grow into manhood and you graduate into manhood. And one of the things I really, again, there's a lot of great talking points here. He goes on to say that being a man is not about how old you are, it is not really about you being 18 or 21 years old. It is about you growing to a certain point and understanding the roles that God has established for you to take as a man. Because one of the big problems I see with manhood these days is that so many men out here, they're buying into these worldly standards about manhood, and these worldly standards are not really what we need to go by. We really need to get back to the standards that the Most High established in His Word regarding manhood. And that's something I talk about in my own books, like The Man Crisis. I talk about men getting back to that biblical standard of manhood because that standard is the foundation for manhood every man needs to follow, because the Most High knew what He was doing when He created men, and He created these standards for manhood because He knows how men are supposed to work on this earth, and He created men to do a specific work on this earth. And that was the core foundation of Dondre T. Whitfield's argument for what's the difference between a male and a man. A male is an individual who Dondre says is really caught up in their flesh, and a man is someone who is focused on things as related to the spirit. And I have to agree with him on those 2 points because, again, growing up in the South Bronx, I ran into a lot of males, and in most cases, your males were primarily caught up in their flesh. They were caught up in the world, and they were caught up in the whole thing of meeting their needs as related to earthly matters, but they were not focused on committing to doing the work the Most High has established for them on this earth. And that's the big problem with many of our males. And that problem usually starts even before these boys are born, because they have learned how to think as related to a world, as because they live in this gynocentric society. And in this gynocentric society, many of these boys, grow up inside of these single mother households, which were created during, the feminist movement. And because these single mother households were created during the feminist movement, their mothers did not learn a culture laid out in the foundation of the Most High. No, they learned a culture that taught them the culture of the world. And because they grew up learning that culture of the world, this is why many of these young boys learned this whole culture of being focused on their flesh instead of being focused on their spirit. So in a home, you not only need a father to teach, you also need a mother to teach. And I was blessed to have a God-centered mother who taught me a solid spiritual foundation. And that was, again, something I could relate to Dondre when he talked about being focused on spiritual matters. And that has to start early on, when you get with a righteous woman, she will focus on that foundation of teaching your young sons that culture of focusing on spiritual matters. And when a boy focuses on the foundation of spiritual matters, he can start out on that road to manhood early on because he is not learning a worldly standard of manhood. He is learning the biblical or and God-centered standard of manhood. And that standard is going to have him focused on being the kind of man that God wants him to be, and that man is someone who is more focused, like Dondre talks about, on service because he understands that the only person he is supposed to submit to is the Most High, and the person he is looking to please the most is the Most High in doing his work on earth. So when you have a man who is focused on spiritual matters, he is focused on doing the work of the Most High. He is focused on being a man by the standard of the Most High. And he is focused on being the kind of man who is interested in things as related to his work on earth for the Most High. And some of the principles Dondre talks about are principles I lived by ever since I was a kid. And one of those principles was taking responsibility. Now, the difference between a male and a man, as related to his core foundation, is his sense of responsibility. Now, your male, he is not focused on being responsible to anyone. He feels no connection to anyone, and he believes that others are supposed to care for him. But a man understands that as God's steward, he is supposed to be responsible, one, to the Most High, and as a steward, he is accountable to the Most High. And he is also, because he is accountable to the Most High, he wants to go out here and do the best work possible so that he can please his Lord. And he also wants to do his best work because he knows that he is going to be an example of the Most High in his actions, and the way he acts will influence and inspire others. And that's something I've learned in my walk with the Most High living God, is that by just me being out here, I can have an impact on others. And when you're a man out here, you understand that your actions out here are something that can influence and inspire others. And that's why you want to go out here and present a positive example of the living God in your actions, because you can inspire and influence people. And that was one of the points that I wanted, that was what I made when I wrote The Temptation of John Haynes. That was one of the core themes of the book, The Temptation of John Haynes. The John Haynes character, he is this guy who he goes to work at this corporation filled with demons. This she-demon, East-demon, has been assigned to seduce him. And as he's presenting himself as this example of Christ, he winds up inspiring the East-demon character and influencing her throughout the book. And she winds up with her life being changed as a result of that. And that was one of the things that, again, I have lived by for many years, because I understand that everybody's interaction with someone who follows God can literally change their lives. So I want to present the very best example of God so that people can see that example and be inspired by it. I'm going to take a minute to put up a link to Dondre T. Whitfield's Male versus Man so you can get your own copy on Kindle. And let's see. I'll put a link to Dondre T. Whitfield's Male versus Man in the chat so you can get your own copy. But Again, a man wants to go out here and be that example of Jesus, that example of God, and he wants to present that positive example so that others can be inspired by that example. And that's something important because we understand that as God, as somebody who made in the image of God, we want to walk in his image, we want to walk in his path, and that's something we want to do. And I like seeing that in Dondre's book about the male versus the man. But I also wanted to break down again what this male is because I know clearly the difference between a male and a man because your male, I grew up with a lot of them when I was in junior high school and high school, and I saw a lot of males when I was going to work at different jobs. So I know what he's talking about as related to these males and how they are just so caught up in their flesh, how they're so caught up in the things that are of this world. And a lot of these guys, they're on this road. They don't know that they're on this road because a lot of them grew up with, and again, in the single mother households, they grew up learning this culture of feminism. They grew up learning these worldly ideals. And even though some of them did grow up and go to church, they really did not get that spiritual foundation as related to manhood. And because they learned in, again, these churches, which are primarily gynocentric, these pastors really didn't do the job they were supposed to in preparing boys to become men. They didn't go out here and start teaching them those principles that God established, like things like as related to stewardship, because the man, when he has been born a man, he male, when he's born male, he has to learn how to grow into manhood, and he has to learn about the whole concept of stewardship. And pastors don't teach about stewardship. They don't really want to teach about it because they're so busy trying to get money out of women. But responsible men, they want to teach boys about stewardship because stewardship is the foundation as related to manhood. When a boy learns that he is accountable to the Most High living God first, and he has to meet these principles that God has established for him early on, that starts him on that road to manhood. Thank you, Akun, for the super chat. I really appreciate it. If you guys want to donate to the super chat, I really appreciate it too. Glad to see you here, T Mac, Black Manta 777, Killer SI, D Woodward, Mobar 7170, Esau is the devil. Yeah, I gave Dondre a strong review because what he was presenting was rock solid in his book, and everything that he presented in the book are things that I have been living by ever since I was a small child. These were things that my mother taught to me and were reinforced by both my father and my older brother. So when I heard him talking in the book about those differences between a male and a man, I could relate to practically everything he presented in his book. So when I look at, again, I've had a lot of experience with males, and a lot of these males, sadly, they don't even know they're on the road to being a male because of the way they have been raised. And they're thinking that this life paradigm is going to lead to them going somewhere. But sadly, what happens is they wind up like a lot of the men I talk about in my book, The Man Crisis, going nowhere because their spiritual foundation has not been built on solid ground. And in order for a man to grow, a man has to have his feet established in a spiritual solid ground with a solid spiritual education. And a lot of the guys are not getting a spiritual education because many of your pastors refuse to preach messages that teach men about manhood. And then you don't have any fathers in the home to teach manhood. But there are men out there like Dondre T. Whitfield and like myself who are trying to give men the things that they need in books like Male versus Man, books like The Man Crisis. And these are the kind of books that can transform a boy's life or a young man's life, because in these kind of books, you're going to get the information that you aren't getting from your pastors, or the information you're getting from that you can't get from the fathers that aren't there, or the men in the community that aren't there, because it is supposed to be for the mother and the father to teach the boy, again, those foundations for manhood, because they are the ones who have to lay that spiritual foundation early on. Because if you don't lay that spiritual foundation, what happens is your boys wind up getting lost, and they wind up becoming these males. And these males, they are just spiritually lost. They're spiritually miseducated. And instead of them becoming men who become responsible stewards, what happens to these men is they wind up with a mindset where they're thinking that the world has to care for them, the world has to serve them. And these boys, they wind up coddled and spoiled for many years, and they wind up becoming these codependent males who wind up living in their mother's homes all the way into their 30s and their 40s. And then some of them, they may wind up with a girlfriend, but they're living in their girlfriend in a codependent relationship where she is taking care of him. And that relationship is a very frustrating one for most women, because most women who have to sit there in this relationship with this man, on an instinctive level, they know something is wrong with this man, because this man he's not in a place where he can take that role of manhood that God has established for him. He is not mentally ready to be a man. He is not emotionally ready to be a man. All he is physically male. Yes, he has the biological parts of a male, but he is not in a mental, spiritual, or emotional position to take the leadership role of a man. And that is, I am paying bills, so I pay bills in the place where I'm living with people. So I am still a man. So I have a business. I'm taking care of my family. So that's not a problem. But that's not manhood. Again, manhood is not defined, like Dondre talks about, by those standards. We have to understand the biblical standards of manhood. And again, the biblical standards of manhood are: you are ready to take responsibility, you are ready to take leadership. Yeah, that's true, D. Woodward. The religious view of manhood is a beta male, but the God centered standard of manhood is an alpha standard. When you look at the God centered standard, it is about taking leadership and responsibility, whereas the religious standard is about submitting to a pastor, not submitting to the Most High. So, now, I mention those men because they're living in a codependent situation, because a codependent man, again, he's not looking to take responsibility. Now, a interdependent man is going to say, okay, I might be in a situation, but I am working towards getting out of the situation. Now, your male, on the other hand, he's not looking to get out of the situation. He's looking to stay in that same place. He is not looking to build anything. He's not looking to build any businesses. He's not looking to work towards any sort of goals. He is not looking to do any work whatsoever. He's just looking to live off this female, and he's looking to be cared for by this female. Meanwhile, a man like myself, again, is going to go out here and build by doing things like writing books like The Man Crisis. And that's not something a male would do. A male is just going to sit there, and what he's going to do is go out here is he's going to sit here and live off this woman. He's going to buy sneakers with this woman's money. He's going to drive around in her car. And he's not looking to take that leadership role. He's not looking to take that stewardship role. And he's not looking to try to move anything forward. He's not looking to take himself to any sort of level. He is basically, again, like Dondre talks about, and I have talked about in numerous videos, stuck in a state of arrested development, and he does not want to take any responsibility. Now, I, as a man, I want to take responsibility, and I want to take control, again, as related to the Most High's roles, as related to what he has established for manhood. But a lot of times, again, a lot of black men, we want to take those roles, but we can't take them because we are denied access in the job market. So we have to go and make our own way. And Dondre talks about, a lot of the things he ran into. He talks about a period where he was having a hard time and how he was struggling, and in the book Male versus Man. And when you're trying to do your very best, God will work things out for you. And I remember reading in the later chapters of the book how he talked about how he was struggling to pay his rent and struggling to pay his bills. And God would come in and bless him with a royalty check out of nowhere. And I've had that experience myself. I've been struggling, and I've had those periods, and I still have those periods right now. I'm still trying to get back to my feet. So I know what he's talking about the Most High working things out for you. And sometimes you'll be sitting there not thinking about anything, like I did in about 2016, 2017, when the sister came and she donated enough money for me to pay for the cover for Isis Samurai Goddess. I mean, I wasn't expecting that to happen, but it happened, and out of nowhere, and it helped me be able to get that book out. And I was sitting there wondering how I was just going to put a black generic cover on that book. And the Most High living God came out of nowhere and had that sister send me that donation. And I was able to get that cover on that book. So that showed me everything that he was talking about. Again, I've lived that, and I know what he's talking about God working things out for you. And I know that the road to manhood is with the Most High. And when you're out here doing the work of the Most High, he will work towards facilitating to helping you move your life forward. So I understand what he was talking about in the book, again, about manhood. And again, manhood is not about you having this big job, because a lot of guys, like he talks about, a lot of males have all of these jobs. Because Dondre talks about how a lot of these males out here, yes, they have executive jobs. Yes, they have big cars. Yes, they have all of these amenities, but they're still males. And oftentimes, because they are males, they are still stuck in that mental, spiritual, and emotional state of arrested development. And because they are stuck in that mental, emotional, and as I see it, arrested development, they're still acting like teenagers. They're still out here doing things like simping and tricking on women. They're still out here trying to chase women and impress women. And they are not working towards becoming responsible stewards. No, what a lot of these guys are, they're still out here trying to go back and forth with different guys. They're still bickering and arguing with different guys. And they are not looking to present that example of Christ to other men and women so that they can have something to admire and look up to. We're out here being overgrown children, still participating in the same dysfunctional behaviors. And because they're participating in the same dysfunctional behaviors, yes, they've got a lot of this success. And Dondre presented a lot of great examples in his book of these people who were extremely successful, but they're not really in a happy marriage. Their family is falling apart. And a lot of these guys, their spirits are just not at peace. And that's the most important thing about being about having a spiritual foundation is you wind up in spiritual peace. Even though you are going through a hardship, God will prepare a table with you, prepare a table in front of your enemies. He will do that because he knows that you are here to do his work on earth. You are committed towards doing his work on earth. And he's going to look out for you. And that's something that, again, a lot of males, they don't really understand that because they are so caught up in the world that they're not thinking about things as related to the spirit. And because they are so caught up in this world, that what happens is all they're thinking about is being about getting things as related to getting their economic needs met for the short term, but not thinking about things as related to their spiritual needs in the long term. And you have to really think about laying that spiritual foundation, because thank you for the super chat. The BS is real, because your spiritual foundation is the thing that is going to carry you throughout this life. And a lot of males, they're not thinking about their spiritual foundation. All they're thinking about is the right now. And that right now can wind up leading to them making decisions that cost them in the long term. Now, as I was reading the book and he was talking, thank you, Yak Diesel. I'm going to read this one. In both the US and the West, we've seen a stagnation of innovation across most industries. How much of this would you attribute to third wave feminism and an influx of beta males? I would attribute a lot of it to not only third wave feminism, but second wave feminism, because second wave feminism created the beta males I talk about in The Man Crisis. And it socially engineered this male who goes out here and he's always living to submit to women, get the attention of women and approval of women. And he is not someone focused on doing God's work on earth. So these feminists out here, they wanted to socially engineer this kinder, softer, gentler male. But this kinder, gentler, softer male was not someone designed to go out here and do God's work. He was, in many cases, your kinder, gentler, softer male. He makes a god out of women, violating God's commandment in the first of the 10 commandments, thou shalt have no other gods before me. And the first commandment, Jesus stated, love the Lord with all your heart, soul, and strength. Because he is worshiping women, he is not in a place where he is focused on doing God's work. Instead, he is focused on pleasing women. And when you have a male out here focused on pleasing women and making women into gods, how can he hear the voice of the Most High? And how can he go out here and create innovations and create new concepts and new products? Because he's out here worshiping the woman. And that's why we have this stagnation throughout many of our industries in America and the West, because many of your males are so caught up in worshiping and pleasing women that they're not ready to be stewards or good leaders that the way God wanted them to be. Because God wanted them, he created the man to be the head. He created the man to be the leader. And most importantly, he created the man to be the direct connection to him. And because he is the one with the direct connection, that's why he can hear the voice of the Most High, and the Most High can direct him towards going out here and creating innovations and inventions and go out here and do his work on earth. But he can't do that because these days, again, you have the feminists out here who created this beta male. And again, the beta male, his whole focus is following female authority figures, submitting to female authority figures, and worshiping females. And a lot of that is why we have so many men in crisis right now, because they always live for the female, but aren't looking to build that relationship with God. Now, the foundation for a man going out here, again, is to have that relationship with God so he can do his work on earth. And guys aren't doing that because they are learning this paradigm that teaches them that they are males, but it's up to responsible men like Dondre T. Whitfield has talked about to go out here and present that model of manhood and teach them that example of what it means to be a God-centered man. Because whenever a man presents the God-centered model of manhood, it really inspires others and it influences others and it has an impact on others, because when they look at that God-centered man, what happens is they see Christ in those men. They see see Christ's spirit in those men. And when men see Christ's spirit in them, they get inspired to be the kind of man that Christ was. And Christ's primary focus when he was on the earth was to be a servant. And as that servant, he was looking to serve the Most High. And as that servant, he also was a steward. And again, a responsible servant is going to go out here and follow the leadership of his Lord, and he's going to want to do the best job possible. And we saw that on this very Good Friday, a couple of thousand years ago, when Jesus went out here and was crucified on the cross. That was the ultimate example of manhood, as I see it, because he was a faithful servant all the way to the end, and he presented that model of being a faithful servant, even by going out here and serving his apostles, and by going out here and serving the apostles, showing them an example of manhood. And Dondre talks about that, but that's also something I live by, because again, a faithful steward wants to be responsible to his Lord, and they want to present, again, that positive example so others can see how they can go out here and be that example. And that's how you really show leadership. And that's something that a lot of males don't understand, because males are primarily caught up in being selfish. Meanwhile, men are about being selfless. And because males are so caught up in being selfish, it's all about them. Whereas for a man, it's all about God, and it's all about him being the kind of steward who will do the best work on earth, so that when he leaves this earth, he can go to God and have a positive account at the end of this life. So a man wants to go out here and serve his community, serve his family, and take care of those that he has authority over, because he understands the most important thing that he has authority over on this earth is his wife and his children. He understands that his family is the most important thing, because so he understands that his family is the most important thing, because if he does not go out here and teach his family good values, if he does not teach his children good values, they can't continue on teaching the word of God to others. Now, what I also liked about Dondre's book is how he shows how he took the lessons of manhood that he has learned over the years through his struggles, and now he's working towards teaching and preparing his son for manhood. And that part of the book, that one really hit me in the heart, because I liked seeing him go out here and not only learn from his experiences, but go out here and teach and prepare his son for manhood at an early age. Because the earlier you start laying that spiritual foundation for your son, the earlier he can grow into the God-centered example of manhood. and then start modeling that example of manhood. And I also like reading where he was talking about how he had run into a situation where his son had been called this racial slur. And he showed a lot of things that David Carroll talked about critical thinking, problem solving, and he didn't get emotional. He wound up working on the solutions to the problem. And I like seeing all of that in the book, how he presented this sense of calmness, this sense of self control, this sense of discipline. These are things that men know how to do because men are focused on problem solving. They are focused on meeting goals. They are focused on the bigger picture. And a man is not sitting there and getting personal with people. He wants to resolve things so that the children can learn how to not only solve the problem, but how to work through the problem in a constructive manner and model an example of how you're supposed to behave in a situation where something goes bad. And when he talked about how he resolved the situation, thank you, Patrick, for the donation. I'm going to get to your point talk super chat in a minute. But when I looked at how Dondre handled that situation, that's how I would handle the situation, because a man has to come in remaining calm. He has to come in remaining in control. He cannot go out here giving into his feelings, because there are consequences, for his actions. And if he acts on his feelings, he will want doing things that will not only harm himself, but he will also harm his son. So what he was doing when he resolved things was he showed how a man is supposed to carry himself in that situation, how he's supposed to compose himself in that situation, how he's supposed to conflict resolve. And all that stuff is, again, stuff David Carroll has talked about for years in his videos. And Dondre presented how you deal with those situations constructively in Male versus Man. Patrick says, "What's up, Sean? It's Patrick. What are your thoughts on how some of these men are stuck in a state of arrested development, stressing about women and trying to get rich in a deviant way?" Well, those are men who are still stuck in this childlike state, and they're stuck believing the ideas of Madison Avenue and Hollywood. They're stuck in this whole idea of they're going to get rich with either rap videos and other assorted schemes, and they're not thinking critically because they're caught up in their feelings about they want to go out here and live this high life on Madison Avenue. Hollywood is presented to them of these hot women and how the scheme is going to get rich, but they're not really thinking critically about the ideas they have in their mind. They're still really stuck in a childlike state, and because they are stuck in a childlike state, they're not thinking on the level of a man. And a man is going to sit there and say, look, these schemes are just not going to work, because the whole point of the scheme is not about me getting rich. It's about me spending money to get rich. And that never works, because if I have to spend money on somebody's whole concept, then how is that going to make me rich? That does not make me rich. If I have to spend money to buy into their concept, it makes me rich when people invest in my concept. So that's one of the big problems when you have with these males, is that they're always looking for the fast dollar, and they're looking to spend it on their lust. And this is something James talked about in the Bible, and this is something Dondre also talks about in his book. And you have, because he uses the book of James a lot in there as well, but you have this male, and again, he's just thinking about his lust. And his lust is because he does not know how to love. He is not doing things out of love the way a man does. A male does things because he's in his feelings. He only wants to get things for the now. He wants to impress the women. He wants to be this big shot. But a man understands he is not the big shot. Christ is the one we need to be focused on. God is the one we need to be focused on. And as a responsible steward, we want to present that example of God so that people will go out here and see God working through us and not see us overall. So that's one of the big problems with your males is they want, again, they're very selfish, they're very narcissistic, and they want it to be all about them. But a God-centered man understands that it's not about me, it's about God, and it's about us doing our work on earth so that we can meet his standard and go out here and do the best work possible. Yeah, because all these guys, a lot of them, they want to care about impressing women, but a woman is that's whole again, that's coming from a place of submission, and these men want to submit to those women, but what they don't understand because they have not read the Bible and they do not understand the role God created for men, they're out here trying to impress the woman, not understanding that puts you in a submissive position under her when God made you to be the leader and he made you to be the head. And as the head, it is for her to go out here and show you her best example and impress you because she is supposed to be your helpmeet and your support. She is supposed to be the one helping you do God's work on earth. And she is supposed to present an example to show you how she is going to serve you because this model of this order of interdependence again is about the Most High living God, Jesus, his son, the man who is the head of the household on the earth and the steward of the earth, and then the woman who is the helpmeet and support. So the man who has the mindset of being God-centered, he understands that he's not there to impress the woman. The woman is supposed to show him how she is going to be of service to him and help him effectively do God's work. Unfortunately, because we have had a culture of 100 years of gynocentrism and 50 years of feminism, so many men have grown up learning how to be males. And because they have learned how to be males, again, they have learned how to submit to the woman instead of them taking that leadership role as a man. But as I was reading Dondre T. Whitfield's book, I could agree with him that it is possible for a male to matriculate into manhood. And I've seen that done in many cases. A lot of guys, when they go out here and join men's groups, or they go out here watching YouTube videos of other responsible men like your Black Male Advice TV, aka Ringo TV Raw, your Pastor Doll, your Mr. Superboy, your Chris Miller, and many other responsible men. They see examples of responsible men modeling manhood. They see responsible men presenting an example of manhood, and they see a model for God-centered manhood. And because they start seeing those models and examples, it inspires them, it influences them, and it makes it where they start taking that critical look at their lives. And what they do is go out here and they start looking at themselves and saying, I need to go out here and take a look at my behavior. I need to take a look at my actions. And there's also another brother, Mad Voodoo Man, aka the Iceman. I used to watch a lot of his videos, and I also used to watch a lot of his blog talk radios. And again, when you see models of actual men out here, it really starts to make you take that look at yourself, and you go out here. You go out here and you start working on becoming a better man. You stop being this male that these feminists want you to be, and you start becoming the man that you are supposed to be. Now, again, I look at a whole lot of different men's videos out here, and again, that's how I can write books like The Man Crisis, because if those brothers are presenting truth to me, I can go out here and teach that truth as well, because I just don't go with one set of information from one male out here. I use information not only from the guys online, but I've also been doing this research again for over 10 years. And when I looked at Dondre T. Whitfield's book, I could say that it was a rock solid, well crafted book on the difference between a male versus a man. And he really presented a lot of positive examples of the difference between a male and a man. And he also goes on, again, to show you how you can start working towards the becoming a man. And that's the most important thing as related to this book, is showing these brothers a solution out here towards becoming a man. And we're not talking about becoming a man the way Madison Avenue and Hollywood have sold us becoming a man, because that's something I talk about in The Man Crisis. Madison Avenue and Hollywood have sold you this idea of becoming a man by going out here and having sex as a teenager, like they did in many of these 1980s teen comedies. They told you that was a graduation road to manhood. And they also told you that you were a man when you were 18 years old. And both, again, all of those concepts are absolutely wrong, because we see from them talking about this whole concept of you becoming a man by having sex with a woman. That's a very gynocentric concept. And again, it's all about you winning the favor and approval of the woman. It has absolutely nothing to do with the Most High living God, and it has absolutely nothing to do with your work on earth. Moreover, it is you learning how to become a fornicator and going out here to learn how to have sex outside of marriage. And this is the main reason why we have so many men out here who become males, who become these baby daddies. And these baby daddies, they sitting up there talking about they're a man because they've had sex with this woman, but they're not ready to take on that responsible role of being a steward. And the role of being a steward is understanding that when you go out here and you have sex with that woman, you need to be ready to make that woman your wife, and you need to be ready to be a father in case that woman is ready to have some children. So if that, well, in many cases, these males, yes, they know how to use their genitals to go out here and have sexual relations with a woman, but then they're not ready to do the work of a man. And the work of a man, part of it is being a father, and being that father is someone who has the values to prepare their son and teach their son how to be a God-centered man. And again, a male doesn't know how to do that. He knows how to physically go out here and have these sexual relations with women, but he doesn't know how to be the man who will be a father and a steward who will prepare his family to be a family that will go out here and be of service to the living God and doing the work of the living God. That's something that a God-centered man is going to know how to do, because the God-centered man is focused primarily on service to God. And because he's focused on service to God, he's going to be reading his Bible, and he's going to be focused on being that God-centered man, focused on things as related to being that man. He's going to understand that, again, God made fornication to be a sin because he wanted to build families through marriage, and he wanted families to come together through marriage, because that way you have a clear, legitimate bloodline, and you also have a family that has a structure in it where the mother is under the authority of the husband, and both of them are teaching the values of Christ to the children. And because they're learning those values, they are learning to walk with Christ and have that relationship with Christ the same way their mothers and fathers have had it, because that model and example is being shown to them. And as that model is being shown to them, they then know how to go out here and present that example to others. So that's all part of having that God-centered education. And again, when I read Dondre's book, he was talking about, again, things that I have lived by and I was taught from an early age. And all those things relate to manhood. And I can, again, agree with what he was saying about this definition of manhood being about you having that whole spiritual definition of manhood and walking spiritually. Because if you have a worldly definition of manhood, what's going to happen is you're going to wind up being lost. Because when I took that critical, when I got older, in like my 30s, I got 35, 36, and I started taking the critical examination of these definitions of manhood. I looked at them from that spiritual perspective that God had shown me, and I said that this is why we have all the problems we have, because these males, they're caught up in the world, they're caught up in these worldly ideals, they're caught up in these worldly concepts, and they are caught up in their flesh. And because they're caught up in their flesh, they can't see how these things are undermining them and really keeping them from living the abundant life that God wants us to live, because God really wants us to live an abundant life. He has provided the very best for us, but the whole problem is many males, because they are caught up in this world, they can't get to that abundant life because they're looking for, like Patrick talked about, these fast track schemes where they can get this big money, but they're not looking to do the work. And that was something else Dondre talked about in Male versus Man, is he talked about how your males, they don't want to do the work, and the work to become a man is very hard. I can tell you from my own personal experience, as far back as 12 years old, that it is a lot of hard work. It is a lot of pain. It is a lot of pain, because you have to go through this process and you have to learn a lot of these hard lessons. But as you learn these hard lessons, what happens is you grow in Christ, you grow closer to God, and your relationship with Christ continues to grow, because as you trust in him and abide in him, he will provide for your every need, and he will look out for you. And he's looking out for you because he wants you to grow with him, and he wants you to grow closer to him. And that's something that a man wants to do, because he knows as long as he has that relationship with the Most High, he is going to be all right. But when he goes out into the world, he is going to wind up lost. And if he winds up lost, that's going to be the end of him, because he has no spiritual support and he's out here in this world. And if he's out here in this world, he's just going to be left to the devil. And the devil, all he wants to do is destroy people. And that was the point I was going to make in my new novel that's coming out this October, if I can finish it, Eternal Night. I make the same commentary. And this is something that many males don't think about, because, again, nobody is really trying to teach these males about Christ, not trying to teach them the God-centered road to manhood. And that's one of the things I like about Dondre T. Whitfield's book, is that he's trying to teach the males out here, manhood, and he's trying to show them the road to true manhood, which is that relationship with the living God. And Dondre, when he was talking about the book, he said that he didn't think he was a very good writer, but from what I read on my smartphone, he is a very good writer. When I look at Dondre T. Whitfield's Male versus Man, it really reminded me a lot of what I was trying to do with the first Stop Simping, Why Men Don't Need Finance to Get Romance. I remember back in about 2012 or so, my friend who was a national best-selling author, she was reading my blogs and she told me, you should write a nonfiction book. And at the beginning, I was really not thinking about writing nonfiction, but when she told me that I could write it, I started to think about it, and that's when I started to start working on the Stop Simping book. And the Stop Simping book helped out a lot of guys out here. The first edition, which was only was a couple of blogs cut and pasted together, it was about 38 pages. And when I look at Dondre T. Whitfield's Male versus Man, it's a lot like that first Stop Simping book. It wasn't wasn't super perfect, but it was very well written. And because his heart was in the message and his passion was in the message, like I was with Stop Simping, it resonated with a lot of people. And that resonation was the thing that encouraged me to go out here and continue writing other nonfiction books. And over time, my skills got better after I did Manginas. And it really started to pick up with Misadventures of Captain Save-'em. And after that, I went back to Stop Simping and I wrote the second edition of Stop Simping. And that book really was the one that changed a lot of people's lives. And when I look at Dondre T. Whitfield and what he did with Male versus Man, I know that there's a lot more books that he can write, and I know that there's a lot more he can write on this subject. And as he continues to write on these subjects, I know he's going to get better at writing. And he showed a lot of promise with this first book. And when I look at that first book, it's rock solid. It's got good writing. He stayed on point. He stayed on message. And when I look at that book, I saw a writer with a lot of potential, and I saw a writer that I wanted to see more from, because I believe that there's a lot more that he can write on becoming a God-centered man. I believe that he can be just as great a writer as your Charles Stanley, who books like Landmines of the Believer, that book is rock solid, one of the best books and one of the best series of services you could ever listen to. And I believe Dondre could go out here and write on the level of a Charles Stanley or a Billy Graham based on what I saw in Male versus Man. So when I looked at that book, Male versus Man, I saw a lot of talent, a lot of potential, and it's just a matter of him going and continuing to persevere as related to writing. And I know writing is very hard because it took me over 10 years to research the man crisis and then even though I wrote the book in 90 days, this book is practically over 15 years of research. And many people are out here who buy it. I have had people with doctoral degrees read this book, and I've had many people say that this book is on the level, again, of a doctoral thesis. And Sandman gave it incredibly rave review, and they said he's the only book he's ever given an extremely positive review. But this book took over 15 years for me to do research on. And when I look at Dondre T. Whitfield's book, if he continues to persevere, I know he could be a truly great writer. When I look at this book, Male versus Man, he did present the argument of the difference between a male and a man. And he also gave a lot of these males out here the roadmap to manhood, something I have talked about in many of my videos, many of my blogs, and many of my books, like The Man Crisis. I've tried to give a lot of males that road to manhood, because I know that there's so many guys out here that were struggling and suffering, and they don't really know what it means to be a man because no one in their communities is teaching them how to be a man. Their mothers are too angry at the males they had relationships with. Their pastors are not preaching a message of manhood because they want to pander to the females, and they don't want to live by those examples. And a lot of the males in the community, they don't want to live by that example because they want to continue getting the panties of those women, and they don't want to live by that God-centered role of manhood because they don't want to be responsible to the Most High living God. Now, many of these males, they want to go out here and remain males because they want to get a pass from people on earth. They want to get a pass in the flesh, not understanding that at the end of this life, they are going to be accountable to the Most High God, who is going to take an account of their lives. And that's the thing that they do not understand about the whole thing as related to being a male. They don't understand that a man understands his responsibility to the Most High God. He understands he is accountable to the Most High God, and he understands that as his steward, he is someone who has to go out here and take that responsibility, because he knows, even not only at the end of this life, during this life, he is still accountable to the Most High God. And because he is accountable to the Most High God, he wants to go out here and do his best work so that he can receive his reward, not only in the kingdom, but also on earth. Because what God will do, again, is provide for your every need when you're on this earth. And he will do that because he wants to see you do that best work possible. And that's something many of these males, they're not really thinking about, because the male, all he's caught up is in the lust of his flesh, the pride of his eye, and this lust for life, and he's not really thinking about anything as related to the spiritual. He's only thinking about what is related to the physical. So your males out here, they're extremely, they think that they're, like the Bible says, they think they're going on a road that they think is right, but the end is death. And they think that that death, because it's not physical, they're doing okay. But what's happening is that they're on a road to spiritual death. And not only on a road to spiritual death, they're also on a road to a life that's going to go nowhere. So a lot of these guys who are males, they think they're doing okay, but they're not doing okay, because they just don't know how to be men. But with this Male versus Man book, it's one of those books that is going to start you on that road to manhood. It's going to start giving you those positive examples of manhood. And it's a book I can highly recommend you go out here and pick up, because each men's issues book that you get for your sons, your grandsons, your fathers, or your brothers, each of those books is going to help any guy out here learn what he needs to know about manhood. And that's something I believe men need to know about, because a lot of men out here, they haven't been taught manhood. And we've had 2 to 3 generations of males out here who know nothing about being a man outside of what they see on television and movies, and they're not really seeing that model of manhood or that example of manhood. So this book, coming from a man, is very important, and you need to see more we need to see more books about manhood for men out here. And I'm glad to see Dondre T. Whitfield taking the time to go out here and present a book like Male versus Man. Now, there are some people who would say that Dondre's book is a little gynocentric, but I didn't really see too much of that, because they saw an interview where he was talking to from a perspective, but I didn't really see that in the book. I saw him coming straight from the Bible. I saw him coming straight from the scriptures. I saw him trying to present you, again, a God-centered example of manhood. And the God-centered example of manhood, it's something a lot of people aren't used to. A lot of people are used to this hyper-masculine male, but your God-centered man, he knows how to turn away wrath with soft answers, and he knows how to be diplomatic in certain situations. What's going on, Chris? Chris is the creator of the Omega Black manga. He's got it Indiegogo getting ready to come out. Let me see if I got this comic here. And his Omega Black is available on Amazon in paperback, and it's available on Comixology. And Chris knows about presenting that positive example of manhood, because he presents it in Omega Black. But the whole thing was with Dondre's book, he presents also a positive example of manhood. So with these type of books, again, when you read them, they feed your spirit. And that's another thing that I have always been, somebody who's passionate about, is presenting material that allows you to feed your spirit. And that's why I wanted to talk about Dondre T. Whitfield's Male versus Man, or Chris's Omega Black, or many other stuff that brothers are putting out here, because what you feed your spirit is going to come out in the real world. What you feed your spirit is going to be your fruit, because the seeds you plant inside of yourself, these are the things that become what I think are the fruit of the spirit. These are the things that allow you to grow out here. And if you feed yourself, healthy material, what's going to happen is you're going to go out here and bear that fruit. You won't become what I used to call in many of my videos, the Negro child of the corn, because you're not growing up like a stalk. No, you're growing up like Dondre talks about becoming a tree. And he talks about that in his book, Male versus Man. And when you become the tree, you can become somebody who not only bears the fruit of the spirit, you can also become somebody who can provide shade for the family, protection. And these are things that, again, what happens when you feed your spirit, positive material. Like as a kid, my parents would not let me read certain things or listen to certain music. And again, they understood about feeding your spirit. And that's something I didn't understand as a kid when my parents wouldn't let me listen to certain music or watch certain shows. I didn't understand that they were trying to protect me. And I didn't understand then, but I understand now that, again, what you feed your spirit and you feed your mind, it can have a major, profound effect on you. And when I look at these guys out here who are buying into this thug culture, again, they're feeding their spirit a lot of junk, and that junk is what's leading to them becoming dysfunctional. And again, you want to feed your mind and your spirit healthy material, and that healthy material, what it's going to do is help you grow to become spiritually healthy, and it's going to allow you to, again, grow up with that spiritual health. And that spiritual health is going to lay that foundation for you growing and matriculating into a strong man when you get older. I didn't see those things when I was, a little kid. But now when I look at Dondre's book and I think about my own life as I was reading the book, it made me, really appreciate having that spiritual foundation given to me by my mother and my father and my brother. Again, they showed me that spiritual foundation. And when you have that spiritual foundation and you're starting, again, on that milk as related to building yourself up spiritually, then you can grow up into the solid food like Paul talks about. And all of that, again, is related to you becoming this man and becoming a man who is ready to serve the Most High, do the work of the Most High, and commit and dedicate yourself to being a faithful servant, a responsible steward, and someone dedicated towards becoming a man under the standard of the living God, a standard that will allow you to live that abundant life. And what I also like about Dondre's book is he does not make it like the pastor who talks about how easy it is out here. He talks about how hard it is. And again, I've lived that life for over 46 years. So I know what he's talking about those rough days, about those hard days when you don't have, the money like you want. You don't have the high paying job. You're not living, this big lavish lifestyle like Madison Avenue and Hollywood have sold you. But the whole thing is that you're in a place where you are spiritually right. You're in a place where your spirit is at peace, and you're in a place where you can grow with the Most High, and you're not sitting there being this spiritually lost individual who is sitting out here and he's so spiritually lost, he's just running around looking for so-called happiness. And what happens is he gets so far away from happiness that all he does is live to become miserable and make others miserable in his company. The same way many of your males, they live to bring other people misery. A person who is God-centered wants to bring peace to others, and they want others to grow, and they want others to have success. And they're happy when others go out here and get success. They're not sitting here. God-centered people aren't sitting here being angry or jealous or bitter. We're out here. We want people to live to get that gift of salvation and then get that gift of peace. So we want to see people, be their very best. And again, a man wants to help sharpen other men, build other men, and grow other men. And that's something I saw with Dondre, what he was trying to do in his work when he talks about, being a coach, and he talks about teaching other men and counseling other men. And that's something I do myself when I make these videos or I write books. I want to see other men have a better life. I want to see other men go out here and, learn what they need to learn. So I see a lot of things that he was trying to do, I'm trying to do right now. And when I look at male versus man, I see a lot of promise for him as a writer. I see a lot of talent on that page as a writer. And it was a book that had me wanting more and looking forward to his next book. So again, this is a book I can recommend you go out here and pick up. And you may not agree with everything he says in the book, just like many people don't agree with everything I say in books like Stop Simping, The Man Crisis, Why 70% of Black Women Are Single. You're not supposed to agree with everything that any author puts in their book. But you can, when you look at his book and you look at many of my books, you'll see a lot of the things I talk about in them. And you'll see that we both present similar arguments as related to the difference between a male and a man. And again, when I look at this book, I see a very well done book and something that every man needs to add to their collection of men's issues books. And I would also recommend you get Game of Life According to the Iceman, Volume 1. Every book that you read as men's issues is going to help you sharpen yourself, build yourself up, develop yourself as a man. And each book that teaches you about being a God-centered man is going to help you grow and get closer to the living God. Now, you can pick up Dondre T. Whitfield's Male versus Man on Amazon.com. It's leave a link to that, and you can pick up his Male versus Man on Amazon.com, and you can pick up my Man Crisis on Amazon.com. You can also go to my author page and pick up Stop Simping, Why Men Don't Need Finance to Get Romance, and you can see a lot of the things I talk about in my men's issues books and books like Dondre T. Whitfield's Male versus Man, in my novels like The Temptation of John Haynes, and you can see a lot of the things that I talk about as related to being a God-centered man in books like the John Haynes series, like the most recent John Haynes book, John Haynes, The Man with Nothing to Lose, because I put those principles also in my fiction because I want to show people that you can how to apply this to your life. So I put it in my fiction, like John Haynes, The Man with Nothing to Lose. This is the Mike Williams cover. And you can also pick up the Josh Howard variant. And you can pick up the John Haynes book, John Haynes, A Conversation with Death, which is also available on Amazon.com, and the John Haynes Dark Succubus. And I also teach women in my books, like the Isis series books, like Isis, My Sister, My Frenemy, Isis, The Beauty Myth, Isis, All That Glitters, Esteem, Goddess of, and Isis, The Main Event, which is now available in paperback and Kindle format. So everything that I talk about being a God-centered man and a God-centered woman, I put in much of my literature. So it's not only in my nonfiction, it is in my fiction as well. I always try to put, messages about having a relationship with God and serving God and being a servant of God in all of my literature. So I don't preach to people in my work. I present things in a story sense. So if you want to pick up any of my work, you can find it all again on Amazon.com. And if you want to help me continue to make more videos like this and continue to, buying books like Dondre T. Whitfield's Male versus Man, you can donate to my Cash App by clicking the link in the description box. And you can donate to my Patreon, which also helps me be able to pay for the internet, pay for books like Male versus Man on Kindle. All of those things are used to pay for the internet, pay for books like Male versus Man, and pay for covers like Bill Walko has designed for ISIS the Main Event, which is available today on Kindle. It came out this week. And John Hayes, the Man with Nothing to Lose. Now, I'd like to see these get the sales up for ISIS the Main Event. I really want to try to get to 10 copies this month. So if you guys could go out here and pick up a copy of ISIS the Main Event, I would really appreciate it, because the book has just come out. I really want to get the sales up for ISIS the Main Event, the newest book in the ISIS series. So I really would appreciate that. And also, John Hayes, the Man with Nothing to Lose. Jaap Kiesel, he is giving it a glowing recommendation. I've gotten a lot of glowing recommendations for that one. But again, I really like Male versus Man. It's a great book. I recommend it. And I'm hoping you guys go out here and pick up Dondre's book. And I hope you go out here and pick up some of my books. Now, I'm going to get ready to wrap up tonight's stream. I have to get to work on ISIS Revenge of the Cyber Goddess, which I'm working on right now. And I have to start finishing up the first act of the book, and I'm getting ready to start the second act, because I'm getting ready to do these 2021 books. So I have to wrap up this stream, but I hope you'll be there for next week's stream. Thank you all for coming to the stream. And I hope you come out to next week's show.